and representatives here, the development partners on our private sector representative. Good morning. Mine is as brief, it's just to make a brief prayer for this session. Our dear Heavenly Father, we come to you today. We thank you for this great day that you have brought us together. Our dear Heavenly Father, we know that it's not easy. Our country has been experiencing quite a number of challenges, but with you, everything is possible. We know that we believe in you and we trust in you, our dear Lord. We ask you to guide us today as we deliberate on the way forward with our partners. Our dear Heavenly Father, we cannot forget to request that you continue protecting and guiding our president and his deputy as they continue to steer this country in the right direction. We know that it's not easy, but Lord, your powers, we believe that everything is possible and we are all headed in the right direction. With this, we ask for your forgiveness, we ask for your grace, and in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, we believe that all shall be well. Amen.
Your Excellency, sir, ladies and gentlemen, may we kindly all take our seats. Your Excellency, the Deputy President of the Republic of Kenya, His Excellency Rigathi Gachagua, Development Partners Group co-chairpersons, His Excellency Sebastian Groth, the Ambassador of Germany to Kenya, and colleague co-chair Dr. Stephen Jackson of the United Nations Resident Coordinator, all Excellency Ambassadors and heads of missions, head of public service, the Honorable Cabinet Secretaries and Principal Secretaries, heads of corporations, heads of foundations, international bodies, and the private sector. Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellency, you have hosted us and lead us in this biannual Development Partners Forum to ensure continued cooperation and tremendous growth in all sectors in the country. Your Excellency, without further ado, I wish at this juncture to kindly invite Madam Wanjiku Okogi, who is the Chief of Staff in your office, to lead us in this first part of the program. Welcome, Madam.
Your Excellency, the Deputy President, Cabinet Secretary is present, Secretary to the Cabinet, Principal Secretary is present, our co-chairs of the Development Partnership Forum, all the development partners present, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Mine is a simple task, Your Excellency, which is to welcome us all to this gathering here today. The Development Partnership Forum is an intervention established within the Office of the Deputy President to bring to practical fruition the spirit of true partnership between our development partners and the Government of Kenya in developing what are cogent programs that will drive the delivery of services to the people of Kenya. Your Excellency, today's meeting is a culmination of various consultations that have taken place within the ambit of the IDPCU unit within our office. These consultations have been very useful in not only reprioritizing the programs and interventions that are undertaken by our various development partners to the initiatives and priorities of the Government of Kenya, but also in ensuring that in the true spirit of partnership, we deliver under the principles of the Paris Agreement. Your Excellency, mine is a simple task, which is to invite you to kindly make your remarks, and may I therefore request that we be upstanding as we welcome His Excellency the Deputy President to officially welcome us and make his remarks. Kindly let us give him a round of applause.
Thank you very much. Please be seated. Chief of Staff and Head of the Public Service, Felix Kosker. Cabinet Secretary is present. Principal Secretary, the co-chair of the DPF, Ambassador of the Federal Republic of Germany, Sebastian Groth. The co-chair of the DPF, the UN Resident Coordinator, Dr. Stephen Jackson. Representatives of the COG, heads of missions, and heads of cooperation. representatives of the private sector and non-state actors, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the SECO Development Partnership Forum under the Kenya Kwanza administration. We are again gathered here today to deepen and strengthen our collaboration towards Kenya's development priorities. This forum is a vital platform for high-level dialogue to enhance the effectiveness of our development approach. Your presence here today demonstrates your commitment to the journey we started last year. Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, since our last forum on November 22nd last year, Kenya has continued to position itself as a thought leader in calling for structuring of the global financial systems in favor of developing countries. Kenya's participation and robust engagement in the global financial conversation has been significant. As part of the determination in driving this discourse, we recently hosted the International Development Association Africa Heads of State Summit and the African Development Bank annual meetings. In such engagements, our voice underscores Kenya's proactive role in shaping global financial policies and practices, which are aimed at ensuring that our people thrive economically, socially, and politically. We remain dedicated to ensuring that our voice is heard and that we contribute meaningfully to the global financial discourse. During the first DPF, we launched the revamped Development Coordination Roadmap. This new framework has been instrumental in enhancing our engagement with the development partners, fostering better coordination, and ensuring that our collective efforts yield tangible results. One of the resolutions was to hold these high-level forums at least twice a year. Today, we gather in fulfillment of that commitment. Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, since our last meeting, there have been changes and remarkable progress in our re-energized engagement framework. For instance, there has been a change in the stewardship of the DPF. His Excellency Ambassador Martin Brower concluded his tenure as the Ambassador of the Kingdom of Netherlands to Kenya after 4 years of distinguished service. Ambassador Brower, together with UN Resident Coordinator Dr. Stephen Jackson, played a pivotal role in strengthening this forum and advancing Kenya's development priorities. We are grateful for his dedication and leadership. I am pleased to announce that the DPF leadership mantle has been passed to His Excellency Sebastian Groth, the Ambassador of the Federal Republic of Germany. In this regard, Ambassador Groth represents our bilateral partners in this forum. Ambassador Groth, we welcome you and look forward to your leadership in this important role. Karibu sana Balozi. In addition, we have reactivated the joint sector working groups, which serve as collaborative dialogue forums on sectoral and thematic issues between the government, development partners, and non-state actors. These joint sector working groups, which are the cornerstone of our coordination framework, have been essential in addressing sector-specific challenges and fostering collaborative solutions. We continue to call on the co-chairs of these sectoral groups to ensure that our engagements remain robust, issue and results-oriented. We want to encourage the co-chairs whose joint sector working groups have not convened to urgently do so. Further, you will recall during the last DPF, we committed to constitute a high-level government policy forum to be co-chaired by myself and the Prime Cabinet Secretary, Honorable Musalia Mudavadi. I am delighted to report that this forum has been constituted and has been meeting. It has unlocked and given direction on several issues that have been brought to our attention. The establishment of this high-level government forum provides the assurance that issues affecting our dialogue and collaboration are given the highest possible attention within government. Additionally, in broadening participation of all players in this important dialogue, we have received a proposal to bring on board a joint sector working group for our constitutional commissions and independent offices. Through Executive Order number 2 of 2023, which created a CCIO liaison office in my office, we endeavor to support the work of these offices while safeguarding their independence. Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is our joint understanding. During the first DPF, we committed to enhance the absorption of our externally funded projects and to work together to develop a framework to strengthen the resilience of our country. In preparation for this meeting, we have embarked on a collaborative effort to delve into the factors that moderate the impact of development assistance. Today, we have the opportunity for an open and honest dialogue on what each party needs to do better to increase absorption rates and, most importantly, demonstrate results and impact in the lives of Kenyans. We recognize that improving absorption rates requires addressing challenges on both sides in project implementation and ensuring timely disbursement and utilization of funds. In keeping with the principles of the Paris Declaration and the Accra Agenda for Action of Mutual Accountability and managing for Results, I urge our development partners to support the government's efforts to consolidate information on all the support provided to Kenya, whether on or off budget. This will enhance efficient, fair allocation and distribution of resources across the various sectors. I therefore urge all stakeholders to approach this discussion with a spirit of cooperation and a shared commitment to finding a lasting solution and filing of affirmative reports back to our respective governments. Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, turning our attention to resilience, Kenya continues to face diverse shocks and stresses. They range from droughts, floods, accidents, pandemics, to economic shocks. Climate change-related shocks have been in particular severe, with the country oscillating between extreme droughts and devastating floods. Recently, we experienced a season of floods that resulted in the loss of over 200 lives, close to 10,000 livestock, displacement of nearly 60,000 households, and widespread destruction of other forms of livelihoods and infrastructure. While the floods have not fully ceased, there has been some reprieve in most parts of the country. We are immensely grateful for the emergency support provided by our development partners, private sector, civil societies, and well-wishers. Many of the partners provided their material and in-kind support through UN agencies and the Kenya Red Cross, the Kenya Private Sector Alliance Foundation, and numerous community and religious organizations. We also extend our heartfelt gratitude to the assistance. You will agree with me then that this thematic dialogue on strengthening resilience is timely. A multi-agency team of 10 joint sector working groups coordinated by my office has been working on proposals to enhance our resilience across all sectors. Today, we'll have the opportunity to review the proposed roadmap to a well-coordinated and robust framework, which will allow us to build our ability to anticipate, respond, adapt, and build back better after these shocks and stresses. We welcome information and strategies, particularly from our development partners, on how to strengthen and deepen our resilience initiatives. Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, as we embark on today's discussions, our shared goal is to improve lives of the Kenyan people. Our collaboration, coordination, and commitment are essential to achieving this goal. I'm confident that with your continued support and active participation, we can overcome the challenges we face and build a more resilient and prosperous Kenyan together. Thank you once again for your presence and dedication. I welcome you to a fruitful, honest, and candid discussion as we work together towards our common objectives. Asanteni sana. Let me once more say welcome. This is the home of our development partners. Please move around freely. enjoy yourselves. After a hard working session, we share a meal together. Those of you who may have carried your swimming costumes, you can have a swim. And we continue getting to know each other informally. I encourage our CSs and PSs to get to know the partners, develop friendships, have informal discussions, be calling each other for a cup of tea, have lunch together, have dinner together. When we talk and engage continuously, we become better people, we get better results, and our objectives will be met with a lot of efficiency. So I want to really, really say welcome here, and I look forward to a very, very fruitful discussion. Asanteni sana, thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency, sir, for your direction and your warm welcome. Your Excellency, sir, if you please, at this juncture, I wish to invite one of the Development Partners Group co-chairpersons, Dr. Stephen Jackson, the United Nations Resident Coordinator, to make his remarks. Welcome, sir.
Asante. And next time, Your Excellency, I'll make sure to wear my swimming costume under my suit. Mheshimiwa Naibu Rais, waheshimiwa mawaziri, viongozi, marafiki, hamjambo. I really want to thank you, Excellency, for once again welcoming us to your house, which, as you say, is our house as development partners, and we feel it. And I want to begin by thanking your excellent team under the leadership of Wanjiku, your Chief of Staff, Jane Kiringai, the many others who have helped to get us to today. And holding the meeting today really helps us to maintain this momentum that we began late last year under your leadership. This rhythm of regular meetings that are very action-oriented and action-focused, so that we together, government and partners, can improve the support that we bring to drive the sustainable development of this extraordinary country of Kenya. We have put in place together this coordination structure with a very deliberate, I think, division of labor. And your vision for this forum, Excellency, is very much one that would be at this strategic political level under your leadership. And so that we bring to the table those issues that, if you like, bubble up from the layer that is those revived joint sector working groups. And we really want to thank you and congratulate you and the government for the renewed momentum in those working groups. Through those working groups, through the Development Effectiveness Group, that we identify those issues that could benefit from that political push and that strategic steer that this forum can give. And so today's meeting is very much a waypoint, I think, in that journey, where we're going to be looking at two issues that I think government and partners together recognize as vital. The first, I think we were all amazingly encouraged, if I can put it that way, by the candor, the frankness, the directness, the honesty of the analysis that was presented at the last meeting as to where we're all stuck a little bit on the question of absorption, how we best put to work efficiently, rapidly, and accountably the support that the development partners are able to bring to Kenya. And then the second, as you said, sir, you've underlined the importance of resilience. If we didn't think it was important before, the weather is literally reminding us day by day, week by week, and life by life. So those two issues, today it will be a waypoint discussion. I think it will be an opportunity for us to check in on where we are in our common diagnostics of those challenges and how we want to map the action forward. And then I think we will also be putting together a rolling agenda for subsequent meetings I think it's envisaged that we would hope to have the next meeting of the forum with you in September, and we're looking forward to that already. My final point would be just to welcome the degree to which we continue to open this forum to the other dimensions of Kenyan society, the private sector, and I see some representatives of the private sector in the audience, civil society, academia, and I think we can continue to do more and more together on that. Excellency, that's it for me, other than, if you will permit me, indulge me, to offer the floor to my new co-chair. I want to close by paying my own personal tribute to the partnership with Martin Brouwer, the ambassador of the Netherlands, who was a true partner in crime, if I can put it that way. But I'm absolutely thrilled to introduce and welcome with you Ambassador Sebastian Groth of Germany, and I know that that will be a partnership that will prosper under your leadership. Sebastian, if I can hand to you.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for these warm words of welcome. But first of all, Your Excellency, Deputy President Gachagua, thank you very much also for your warm welcome. If I see your beautiful house, we might convene more often than twice a year. And as you said in our briefing talks, organize a nice Nyamachoma as well. I think my co-ambassadors would be very happy. Dear Stephen, dear representatives also of the Kenyan government, dear ambassadors from the donor group, it is really with a lot of respect and pleasure that I take over the task of Martin. We all know it's big shoes, heavy shoes full of experience and professionalism, but also, of course, a very, very nice guy. And I think also from here we can wish him all the best for the next chapter in his life in the beautiful Netherlands. Dear Deputy President, I think together with all my colleagues here in the DPG, we share the conviction, and Stephen underlined this, that this is really an indispensable format for the discussion of strategic questions of our cooperation, of our partnership with Kenya, and to issue strategic guidance for the resolution of cross-cutting, really political strategic issues. And in this regard, I would also like to thank the Kenyan team for the preparation of this meeting, and also the heads of cooperation from all our embassies that put the groundwork together. And I think in this configuration, we will really achieve good results in the next month and years ahead. So I'm really looking forward to the exchange. I can only offer also to all my colleagues here from the donor side, my mobile is always on. If you have something to discuss or an idea or something that we should take up with the government side, just give us a ring, inform Stephen and myself, but the same, of course, is true for the Kenyan side. If there's anything on your side that we should take up, that we should discuss amongst ourselves, I'm always open for this. Thank you very much for the warm welcome, and I'm really looking forward to the cooperation with all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency Ambassador. And DPG co-chairpersons, you can scan the QR code to access the said documents. Your Excellency, sir, may I now call upon the Director, UN Information Service, Ms. Sandra Macharia, to kindly moderate through the next sessions. Welcome, Madam.
Thank you, Rose. Your Excellency, the Deputy President, representatives of the Government of Kenya, heads of mission, representatives from private sector and civil society, academia, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning to you all. We are now going to turn to the first substantive agenda item of the day, as described by the Deputy President and, of course, our colleagues Stephen Jackson and Sebastian Groth. And that is related to the challenges of absorption capacities. This, of course, has been a mutually agreed agenda item between the Government of Kenya and the development partners following the last Development Partners Forum in November of last year. The objective of this agenda item is to receive status of the Official Development Assistance, ODA, portfolio and assess the main challenges related to absorption capacities, get a joint update on steps taken to address these, and of course, the steps to be taken following our discussions today. As Stephen mentioned, the discussions today are a waypoint and to be followed up in future development partners fora. It is now my pleasure to invite Dr. Chris Kiptong, Principal Secretary of National Treasury, to give us an overview of recent initiatives by the government related to absorption capacities for both loans and grants. P.S. Welcome.
Your Excellency, the Deputy President, and all distinguished guests, good morning. I'm hoping the presentation can be placed on the screen. So I have a short presentation on ODA. And that is the outline of my presentation. Just to say that the legal framework that underpins ODA, first is the Constitution of Kenya. That actually indicates that we must have a consolidated fund through which all monies have to come. And out of that, we have now the the PFM Act and also the regulations that go with it. And then for all projects, we have PIM regulations. And for projects that go to county governments, we also have the County Government Additional Allocation Act. Then we have a number of government circulars, as well as a debt borrowing policy. So that is the legal framework, which is a requirement for aid effectiveness. And for ODA projects and programs, we have two categories of development partners. We have multilateral partners and we have bilateral partners. For multilateral partners, we have the World Bank and the IMF group. For the World Bank, we have IBRD and IDA. For Africa Development Bank, we have the African Development Bank, we have the African Development Fund, ADF, we have the Afri-Exim Bank, and the Africa 50. For the European Union, we have the European Investment Bank and the European Development Fund. Arab and Middle East has Kuwait Fund, BIDEA, OPEC Fund, and Saudi Fund. For UN agencies, we have a number, but we have named there for the UNFPA, the UNICEF, the UNDP, the UNEP, the WHO, and the GCF. Then we also have the Global Fund. For bilateral, we have within the Asia and Pacific, China is one of the main bilateral donors, together with Japan, India, and South Korea. For the Americas, we have the Ford Foundation, the USAID, Gavi, Millennium Challenge Corporation, the MCC. And for Europe, we have a number of bilateral countries. I've just named a few, but there are quite a number of them. Germany, France, Belgium, Italy, Austria, and we also have Israel being part of that. And Sweden, Denmark, Norway, Finland, Netherlands, and Spain, among others. I don't know why it's stuck. Somebody help me? Okay. Oh, how do I bring it back? Okay. Yes. Okay, so let me now give the specifics of the total ODA funding. we have about, within our loan portfolio, we have projects worth 2.6 trillion that are active currently. And all of them, when we count them, there are 256 ongoing projects. They are all in different sectors. Within the road sector, we have 30 of them. Water and sanitation sector, we have 40. Energy sector, we have 35. The agriculture sector, we have 24. Education, 17. Health, 15. And others are 95. And how are these projects distributed? We have 44 projects within the World Bank worth 1 trillion. And that constitutes 42% of the entire portfolio of 2.6 trillion. Asia and Pacific follow with 41 projects of 548 billion, constituting a share of 21%. For Europe, we have 61 projects worth 450 billion, constituting 17% of the share. Africa Group has 38 projects worth 287 billion, constituting 11%. For European Union and EIB, we have 20 projects worth 80 billion, constituting 3%. For the UN agencies, all of them are 26 projects, about 50 billion worth of those projects, and the share is 2%. Global Fund has a share of 1% with 8 projects amounting to about 32 billion. The USA has a share of 1% with 8 projects worth 31.5 billion. Arab and Middle East has a share of 1% for 11 projects worth 28.2 billion. The IFAD also has a share of 1% with 4 projects worth 22.7 billion. So total 256 and projects worth 2.6 trillion shillings. So we have tried to do age analysis, and this, Your Excellency, is work in progress. I have asked the entire team in the National Treasury to do portfolio analysis. And I've seen good progress, but we have not completed this work. We hope by this next meeting we'll let you know. Because we want to do age analysis and ask ourselves why we still have a lot of projects that are, that have stayed for too long. What is the impact of them? Why are we having them staying for that long? But this is what is showing in the preliminary work that we have done. 10 years, projects that have done over 10 years, we have loan amount of 216.3 billion, a grant amount of 22.3, totaling 238.6 billion. In this 10-year period, we have only disbursed 132.9 billion, which means 61% of disbursement. We need to ask ourselves, why 10 years? In 10 years, we have only done 61%. This is something that I think we need to work on. Those projects between 5 and 9 years, for loans, they are worth 1.1 trillion. The grants are about 104 billion. So the total portfolio is 1.19 billion. We have only disbursed 43%. Again, it's still low. Those between 0 and 4 years are those between less than 4 years are actually we have only done 12% disbursement. So total ongoing projects are worth 2.4 trillion and in terms of loans and 245 billion in terms of grants. So the total amount is 2.67 trillion. But you can see we have only disbursed 731 billion. A whole 1.93739 or about 1.94 trillion is yet to be disbursed. So we have a disbursement rate of 30%. That's quite low. And we have isolated also an important component of these projects, which are the stalled projects. Stalled projects and grants of about 2.5 billion. So in total, we have about 238 billion worth of projects, and we have only disbursed 42.6. So disbursement rate is 18%. This is not good because projects are stalled and the money is tight, so we are paying commitment fees. We are not getting value for money, and we have said we need to sort this once and for all. Either we complete them or we just sign off and see whether we just abandon them, because we have just to do something about them. So, Your Excellency, I now present the ODA status as at 31st May in terms of portfolio. So the Africa group has done 54% disbursement. IFAD has done 54%. I'll not go into the numbers because of time. The EU EIB, 47%. Global Fund, 46%. Asia and Pacific, 44%. Europe and World Bank, Europe itself is 42%, while World Bank is 35%. Arab and Middle East, 34%. UN agencies, 3%. USA is 0, but I think it's just because of the fact that we have put one digit. I mean 0, eh? Okay. You want me to go back? Off budget, yes. That's why it's 0, because it's off budget. Most of the USA support is off budget. So total, you can see there is, we have 40% disbursement rate for all the projects as at 31st May this year. And this is the status by sector. I think I had mentioned earlier, roads take 12%, water take 15%, energy 14%, education sector 7%, agriculture 9%, health 9%, and the other sectors 37%. Look at the trend. How have we been doing before? We have started from 2016, 2017. I urge you to first look at the lower part. You can see that 2016, 2017, the disbursement rate was 75%. The next fiscal year, 2017, 2018, it went up to 81%. 2018, 2019, another increase to 86%. 2019, 2020, 87%. Then we started declining from 2020, 21. It could be because of COVID at that time. And it has been, it went down to 77%, then 2021, 22, 65%, and then 22, 23 has picked up to 68%. You can see in the disbursement trend that it went up and then it has come down. And so we still, if you are to rate this, if you are doing an exam, this is probably a C+, not even a B. Now, we are looking at, for up to May this year, how have we performed in this fiscal year? Loans revenue, you can see we have a printed estimate of 123.8 billion. But in supplementary 1, we reduced by 9 billion. In supplementary 2, we have reduced by 12 billion. So the total revised estimate is 102.5 billion. And the cumulative disbursement is 66 billion. So we have an absorption rate of 64%. Grants is 63%. And loans under A&A is 62%, while grants under A&A is 25%. So total is 60%. I think we'll be coming back to this, why, especially in supplementary, we have to always, most of these projects are earmarked for budget cuts, because there is no need to project higher expenditure when you can see that you are not going to spend that money anyway by end of the year. So this is 2023-24 absorption rate. The red line is what we had planned to spend, but the blue line is the actual. So you can see the funding gap there. And this is something we need to address, that when we plan a budget, we implement that budget. Otherwise, we plan and it's like planning to fail, and that is really not good. Something we need to know, when we put in the budget, let's implement the budget as planned. Now, let me go through the development partners the partnership, this is the the Development Partners Disbursement status. I'll go through the International Union for Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources, that's IUCN. As 31st May this year, their disbursement rate is 100%. I'll not go to the numbers, but they have one project. The African Union has one project, 91%. European Development Fund has 13 projects, the disbursement rate is 80%. Government of South Korea has 5 projects, disbursement rate is 80%. The government of Italy has 5 projects with a disbursement rate of 74%. IFAD has 4 projects with a disbursement rate of 74%. The government of China has in these three projects and has a disbursement rate of 70%. World Bank has 33 projects with a disbursement rate of 66%. The government of Belgium, 5 projects, 65%. Government of India is 2 projects, 64% disbursement rate. Africa Development Fund, 34 projects, disbursement rate of 62%. UN Women, that is United Nations Women, has a disbursement rate of 59% for 1 project, while government of France has 15 projects with 59% disbursement rate. Green Climate Fund, we have 2 projects, and the absorption rate is what you see there, 58%. Same to government of Germany, 21 projects, 51% disbursement rate. Government of Finland, 2 projects, 58%. Government of Sweden, 47%. And you see that Global Fund is 40%. We have the rest of the, I'm not sure whether I should go through all of them, but this can be availed to you. You can read so that I save time. We have off-budget ODA projects. We have projects that come in, we don't get in the budget, but they support government of Kenya, and we want to monitor. So Gavi is supporting the health sector under the project called Health System Management. This is a grant which was signed in 2001. It has 23 years. It is now about 23 years since it was signed. The amount is 42.5 billion, and we are doing consultation to align next funding cycle. For WFP, we have also a project called Sustainable Food Systems and Resilience Livelihoods project in the health sector, and it's a grant. The amount is what you see there. The government of Japan has 3 projects in interior and roads, and all of them are grants, except that of loans, which is 2.8 billion. Austria and India, USAID, and Ford Foundation, you can see all the details there. I really don't need to go through all of them. But that is the status of off-budget ODA projects. So let me finish my presentation with just highlighting why is it that we have low absorption rate, as you have seen. There are those related to government of Kenya, which we are actually addressing, and I've been meeting the teams. I'm hoping through the executive office of the president, we work together to see how to bring together MDS to address this problem. One is the historical issues that have to do with project design that result in change of scope. When you change scope, it means the project has to slow down a bit before it picks up. There are projects we start when you have not sorted issues around way leaves or land-related settlement issues. So a project goes on and then it stops because there is no way leave. Contractors sometimes face challenges. They are declared bankrupt, or some people go to court and the matter is delayed. So we have mitigating measures which we have been discussing. And I believe we will come back to this later, but we are talking about really making sure that we have a checklist of mandatory requirements prior to mobilization of external financing. And each MDA that requires support must make sure that you have all these mandatory requirements, and then you seek for funding when you know we can proceed without any hiccup. And also, we are saying we need to establish the project implementation management unit and follow the PIM guidelines. Then try and create a dashboard which can help us see how it is moving and then take corrective measures. We have also situations where we face budget reductions, and especially when we are now doing fiscal consolidation. What we have submitted to Parliament now and for next year, we want to achieve a fiscal consolidation of around 3.4% of GDP, and that means trying to raise revenue but also rationalizing expenditure. And for the supplementary budget that is before Parliament now, what we have done also is to look at progress up to end of May and see that within 1 month, clearly there is no way that there will be absorption. And that is a candidate for cutting. And that also tends to impact the projects negatively. There is also the counterpart funding, which has been a problem. It suffers more because when we are doing budget cuts, we may not be able to allocate the resources. So, and this is why there is a proposal on how to handle counterpart funding. Sometimes Parliament delays in approving the county government allocation, additional allocation act. So when it delays, by the time it's approved, then you implement the project. Clearly, before end of the year, you will find that you will not be able to absorb the money you have already put in the budget. So we have some mitigation measures that you see there. And then the third issue is poor contract management and capacity challenges, which have led to poor execution of contracts, because you have, sometimes we exclude key clauses in taxes within the Public Procurement and Disposal Act and like the Public Financial Management Act. You may have some clauses on advance payment, but you may not properly show it in the contract, and then it becomes a problem when you're implementing. So sometimes we have submission of payments without requisite documents, and because of that, there's back and forth in terms of asking for those documents. That delays payments. We have last-minute rush for payments on projects ending, and that can be also problematic. Then there are penalties and interest on delayed payments, which is an issue. We have mitigating measures there. I will not go through them because I think I'll mention them in my closing remarks. Others are conditioned precedents to effectiveness. Sometimes we have delays in granting of legal clearance and legal opinion, especially from the Office of the Attorney General. Sometimes there's also delay in subsidiary agreements, back and forth within ministries, National Treasury, and the AG. That is a challenge. Then we also sometimes have what we call supply-driven projects, where sometimes you have money, people coming, donors coming in to push to say we have money, but it's really not that we need that. But some entities will require, they may not be in line with priorities of government, but we still take, and that becomes a challenge. Then M&E is also an area that we want to improve. Then we have those related to development partners. We have a problem sometimes when we have delays in award of contracts or delay in procurement of PIU, the project implementation unit staff, because of not getting no objection from the partners, because we can't proceed without getting no objection. So we have seen mitigating measures like World Bank and Africa Development Bank. They have actually come up with a system-based approvals, and this is really helping to address the delays. Maybe other donors can also follow the queue. And National Treasury continues to engage the development partners and ministries with a view to resolving this issue of no objection challenges. Then we have varied condition precedents by different development partners for co-finance projects, and this leads to delays in commencement of the project. So again, we are engaging to see how to sort this. We also have the problem of multi-layered contract management for co-finance projects, like the Arab Middle East development partners, which leads to delays. Then we have length process period in redesigning of projects by consultants, delaying actual implementation. So I want to finish this presentation by presenting to you what we have agreed as way forward. We propose the following policy and technical recommendations. On policy, we are saying all projects must be approved by Cabinet for ownership and policy direction. 2, we want all projects to comply with the legal framework for ODA funding with emphasis on the PIM process and the National Treasury circulars, particularly circular number 12 of 2018. We need to ensure that no new projects are initiated before completion of the old ones. The 4th one is that we need to encourage financiers to take up 100% cost of project to reduce burden of counterpart funding. We have seen this done by World Bank, and the Africa Development Bank has also done it. And this, because of that, we have been able to push projects forward, because the problem of lack of counterpart funding is not there anymore for those entities. Number 5 is that we need to encourage all development partners to develop framework agreements as a guide to funding. And number 6, county governments to be allowed access to at least 50% of funds prior to the approval of the County Government Additional Allocation Act. We also want to encourage development partners to bring projects on budget in the spirit of aid effectiveness. And we are also proposing that we ensure that no off-budget projects are included in the appropriated estimates. And number 9 is that all development partners mapping should map to identify a comparative advantage by sectors to guide on new funding to ascertain an equitable spread. And lastly, we need to review certain development partners' recruitment policy of the PIU unit to improve it, to make sure that it moves fast. And on technical, we are saying we need continuous portfolio review, and this should be joined between MDAs and development partners. We are also saying MDAs should identify projects for cancellation and or restructuring, especially those with low capacity absorption and are over 5 years. We have done a few projects with the World Bank where we have cancelled some of them and or prioritize. Then development partners should use country systems, and where need to be to strengthen the system. Where necessary, we need to strengthen the system, particularly on procurement and audit. We need to ensure that all MDAs prepare and submit realistic budgets and ring-fence counterpart funding, the counterpart funds. We also need to ensure relevant and adequate capacity building for project implementation teams, both at the National Treasury and MTS, to make sure that they are in place before commencement of projects. I think I've come to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, PS Kipto. I would now like to invite Dr. Stephen Jackson, the UN Resident Coordinator, to supplement the presentation and highlight some of the challenges from the development partners side and propose some steps in the longer term and towards the next DPF. Stephen Jackson, may I encourage you to be brief?
You may, indeed. Thank you very much, Sandra. And PS, thank you so much for the presentation and for its candor. A C+. I think all of us would agree with that. And I think that there is much that can be done on the government side and on the development partner side to get us up to that A+, where we are all committed to being. I think you probably heard some gasps in the room from some of the development partners in terms of the figures. And I think that is testament to the following. It reminds me of the story of, putting 5 blindfold men in a room and then trotting in an elephant, and one of them grasps the trunk and thinks that he's got hold of a garden hose, and one holds the leg and thinks he's got hold of something else. And so we're all looking at this rather large and complicated beast, the elephant, that is this partnership that we have together, that goes in multiple directions, and each of us, I think, are only at the moment able to see part of it. And that leads to us arriving at some different places in terms of the analysis, and I'll come to that, but actually a surprising degree of convergence in some of the diagnostics and some of the recommendations. And to to start at the end, what I would say is that this points to the need to get this task force between government and partners up and running as soon as possible to bring these different worldviews and analyses together as soon as we can. I have a very brief presentation that will take us through what we identified from the development partner side through some interviewing and some survey work as the sort of 5 main baskets of challenges that I think we feel we have. And there's quite a degree of convergence there. So let me go to the first of them. So we agree with you. I think that there is some inconsistency both on our side and, if I may, on government's side in how we define. So some of the definitions that were used to draw up those numbers. Are we talking about quote-unquote on budget? Are we talking about quote-unquote off budget? The different groupings, whether actors are bilateral or multilateral, what constitutes a project? Is it a loan? Is it a grant? Is it a multi-year? Is it a single year? And so on and so forth. There's some inconsistency in the definitions, and then also in the requests and the requirements which lead to delays in signings of agreements. And I think you pointed to that towards the end of your presentation, PS. These were conditions precedent to agreement, I think was how you put it. So I think there's a lot we can do there in terms of streamlining procedures, standardizing templates, and so on as appropriate. The next, and I really want to lean into this one quite hard, there are some practical, and I emphasize that they are practical, not principled, challenges for many development partners in the room in living up to the strictures of the Public Finance Management Act and some of the associated regulations that go with that. Why do I say practical, not principled? So we are all, as development partners, committed to full visibility and transparency of what we are doing, who we are working with, what we're trying to accomplish for Kenya and with you, and the maximum possible alignment. But what we see in the development partner landscape is a real variety of different forms of engagement and, critically, scales of engagement. So the same kind of approvals procedure that work for a, forgive me, Keith, a $100 or $200 million loan don't work for a 500,000 project. There I'm talking in dollars, but we can make the same numbers. So already anticipating the idea that every project would need cabinet approval, I can say from the perspective of the United Nations, where we have literally hundreds of projects, the cabinet would be doing nothing else. So what we need is different approval mechanisms for different scales and different forms of engagement. And that leads, on this point, there was a particular gasp from me when the UN was listed with a 0% implementation rate. In this very tent, just a few weeks ago, with the Deputy President, we reported an implementation rate of 86%. And the discrepancy there, of course, is that the majority of the work that the United Nations does with the support of the partners in the whole is quote-unquote off budget. And I think the same, David, where are you, for the United States? 0%. I don't think Congress would love it if you were at 0%. So we know you're not. Why are we, quote-unquote, off budget? I actually asked in our country team, one of our experts, to give us a presentation just a couple of weeks ago on what it would take to move UN projects and programs to visibility on budget. And I had to stop the colleague on slide 8 and step 27 of, I think, 34 steps. And again, forgive me, Keith, a 34-stage approval process maybe for a loan portfolio in the hundreds of millions of dollars and therefore in the, what would that be, the tens of billions of shillings. But if you're going to go through a 34-stage approval process for a project that is a pilot project at, 100 million shillings in a couple of counties, it just doesn't make sense. So we have to find a way, and in short, the Public Finance Management Act doesn't work for the scale at which some of us are working, and I know that that's true of some of the bilaterals. Let me hasten. Lengthy delays in processing invoices, disbursements, or related to taxation and exemptions. I think there's a lot of work that we can do here. It is the case, for example, that for many of us, approvals for disbursement have to be signed off on by somebody at your level, PS, or above. And we know how overwhelmed you are and how often people like you are traveling. But there is right now no delegation of authority, and it seems to us that perhaps for smaller sums there could be a delegation of authority. Again, a kind of subsidiarity of approval. But often contractually agreed to timelines are broken. Sometimes that's us, sometimes, forgive me, that is you, and that creates unnecessary burdens. And as you pointed out, PS, particularly for the loans, that means that government is continuing to pay administration fees while implementation is remaining stalled. That doesn't work for anybody. So are there some low-hanging fruit there around delegation of authority and otherwise? The question of counterpart funding, and again, PS, we converge with you here. That often is a cause for delay and unpredictability. If counterpart funding is expected either as the government's contribution to a loan agreement or to a grant agreement, we need to have much better prioritization with you and consultation with you beforehand, and we as partners share in that. But other times, and your boss and mine, Prof. Juguna, is not in the room yet, I think, but I remember him receiving me at 6 in the morning to unblock a small but significant grant agreement between a bilateral partner and a UN entity and the Kenyan government. And I was told, well, the reason it's blocked, Stephen, is that there's no provision made for the counterpart funding that the program expects. To which I said, yes, but the program doesn't expect any counterpart funding. CS, it's a misunderstanding. We had the letter of no objection within 35 minutes. So very often there can be this mistaken assumption that counterpart funding is needed when it isn't. So we have to get better at that. Final point. So lack of visibility to and importance given to development partner support that is not in the form of direct budget support. A decade ago, a lot of us were doing direct budget support. These days, very few of us are. And I think what we saw in the presentation that you gave, which was excellent, but it means that the direct budget support and the on-budget work is much more visible to government than the stuff that is, quote unquote, off budget. We need to find a way to render that quote unquote off budget support more visible to government, more accountable to government, more transparent, and where it can be better aligned, but in a way that doesn't hold things up. And as I've already said, I think we collectively feel that the Public Finance Management Act isn't a supple enough tool to deliver on that. So we need to find other ways to render that larger quantity of support. I was trying to do the numbers in my head, but I think it's at least as much again. I think it amounts collectively to about another $2 billion per annum, or something like 200 billion shillings. Please don't quote me on that because I'm doing it from memory, but it's about that order of magnitude. How do we render that visible to you, accountable to you, transparent to you? So, like you, some thoughts about a way forward. We reaffirm our commitment to strengthen that visibility and that alignment. We want to work with government to do that. We want together better to seek the solutions that would help to render visible that full totality of the support that is brought, including support that is not directly on the budget. Our discussions today were intended as a waypoint. We are converging what we see from the partner side and what government sees from its side. I think, therefore, the candor that we've had this morning, I hope, is a very helpful step towards that. I think it's critical now that we do have that joint task force that can converge the two views, that can dig into the recommendations together, dig into the analysis together, come up with some recommendations to bring to the Development Partners Forum, inshallah, in September. Particularly, what are the key blockages? I think we've both identified those. What are some low-hanging fruits? And what are some priorities, even though they're not very low-hanging? I don't think that the taxation exemption issue is a low-hanging fruit. It's a complicated one, but it is very important that we get it right for all of the partners in the room. We need to then identify timelines, milestones, and responsible focal points on government side and the development partners side for the implementation of each recommendation, and then we need, and this is the crucial bit, that's what this Development Partnership Forum is for, is to bring this issue back and for us to hold ourselves accountable to what we've agreed. Where are we on fixing the visibility? Where are we on fixing the implementation pace? Where are we on working out better ways to ensure that visibility, that alignment, that transparency, and that accountability that don't hold us back and hold us up? Thank you very much.
Right, thank you, Dr. Stephen Jackson, and add to that, P.S. Kiptor. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we are now going to open up for plenary, and I'm requesting for brief and action-oriented inputs, which will be collated by our rapporteurs from the Office of the Deputy President, and there will be roving mics going around. So I would like to invite, if you'd like to make an intervention, I'm going to open the floor now. Please raise your hand. Please introduce yourself so that we know where the intervention is coming from. Okay, we have an intervention there. Thank you.
Yeah, good morning. Happy to be here. I'm Wanjiro Gekonyo. I'm representing Reality of Aid Africa. And thank you for the detailed presentation. And it brings to mind, coming from a civil society perspective, there was a discussion that I was party to, and I'm not sure how far it progressed, around a program called COST. And this program was being proposed to the government of Kenya by another civil society platform to bring visibility to projects around PIMS, the project implementation framework, and just generally to open it up. And looking at this, I think there's need to pay attention to that accountability side while sorting out some of the nitty-gritty around what we are seeing here. So I'd like to add that. And maybe the other reflection is around the budget approval process and compliance. We are seeing the same thing at counties, where projects are put into the budget, the assessment and evaluations are not done, the land's not secured, and then you have non-implementation. So that is also, it's a compliance issue, it's a culture, but it's also looking at the regulations and the law, because this is a gap that was introduced with this PFM. The previous planning and approval process was much more open, and again, stressing, of course, to ensure that there's collaborative government, there's oversight by citizens in the process as this happens. So for me, it's just accountability. There are tools and platforms that exist. This is a fantastic forum to consider bringing on board, that level of transparency and visibility. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Wanjiro, for that on visibility and transparency around the approval system as well. We have a question.
Thank you. Not a question, just a couple of comments following up, and thank you for the time and space.
Introduction, please.
Yeah. My name is David Gosney. I'm the USAID Mission Director here for Kenya and East Africa. Just a couple quick things to follow up on the really helpful presentations. First, want to underscore what Stephen mentioned is a complete commitment for complete transparency and accountability for all funding. Kind of to underscore for USAID's contributions, over the last 2 years, each year alone, we provided over 1 trillion Kenyan shillings of development assistance. All of that captured either through our implementation letters that are signed by both the CS and the, from the relevant ministry and the CS for Treasury. And so fully committed to working with the Treasury to determine best how to capture those, and I think any development partner assistance so that it's fully accounted for in whatever way is appropriate going forward. The second thing, just to underscore on the VAT issue and give you a very practical example. Right now, very much appreciate the efforts that are going on in the Treasury office to continue to reform that process. The reality is our figures partly because of our processes. We really only recap about 15% on average of all the VAT that is paid through our partners, largely because it takes quite a long time to do that, and the time results in either things being time barred or our inability to capture that. So we also are standby ready to provide technical assistance, however helpful, with the Ministry, the Treasury Office, and other development partners to work on that going forward. And the last thing is really this commitment to efficiency. One of the things that's, I think, sort of related to absorption there and somewhat to government contributions is one of the most meaningful contributions that can be made is just support for staff to attend important coordination meetings. We're all committed to that. Per diems and a common policy and perspective on that. And I know that, we look forward and we're continuing to work with the Development Effectiveness Working Group to come up with a common understanding on what the roles and responsibilities are in terms of meeting locations, per diems amount, top-ups, those type of things. So we have a consistent approach to all that and look forward to continuing to work with the Treasury Office on that as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for those 3 points around transparency, technical assistance, and efficiencies. And we now have CS Tuya? Yes? Is it? No? I'm sorry. Yes. So mic for CS Moses Kuria, please.
Thank you very much, Wanjiro. I just want to give some perspective from this other side of government. I am delighted with presentation by Professor Kipto, by Dr. Kipto, because if it was a courtroom, it could have been a pre-bargain or mitigation. But I think some real issues have come out that we as government need to sort out in terms of the process. There is a lot of cleaning up required. But on the good side, I want to report that going forward, the issue of absorption of development partner financing is now beginning from 1st of July, is going to be part of the performance contracting. So that as we measure the people, we'll also be measuring them in terms of how they are absorbing development partner program. Secondly, I think from the co-chair, the issue of counterpart funding, I think has been very clear that not all the time is it a requirement for program to proceed with counterpart funding. So again, there is need for the two sides to sit together and say, is the issue of counterpart funding becoming a bogeyman? Is it being blamed for everything? So that even where it is other things that should be done, we are quick to say it is counterpart funding. So I think we need to be microscopic on this particular issue, so that now we are able to say what is the real reason for this program not to proceed. Let me also say that under the my delivery docket, beginning from next week, I have a monthly reporting obligation to Cabinet, and among the things I'll be reporting on to Cabinet is this issue of absorption and performance generally of this development partner platform, because we realize the need for us to escalate and report them on a very high level. May I finish by saying that the issue of mapping of the government side and the development partner part needs to be sharpened. We need to really ask ourselves which government ministry or department has got which program and who are the partner interested in that particular program. I think there's still some loose ends which I think the unit in the Office of the Deputy President will work with the ministry to ensure that we become more sharper in the clustering and especially in the pairing and mapping of partners to departments. Thank you.
Thank you, CS, for that. We have time for one more intervention from the floor. So I think we'll go to you. Yes? If you could please keep it brief. Yeah.
Yes, good morning. My name is Henriette Geiger. I'm the European Union Ambassador. First of all, thank you, Vice President Gachagua, for the kind invitation, and PS Kipto for the very good presentation. I want to start by fully endorsing what my US colleague just said on all 3 points. These are also points that are very valid for us, and they merit some further in-depth discussions in a working group format. Also on the figures and the tables presented by the PS, definitely we need to sit down on some of the figures to coordinate. I wanted to talk about streamlining of the process, because when we talk about absorption capacity, what Stephen said before, unblocking is what we do right now. We unblock one by one, and that is not the way we can work, because if I unblock my project, then the other projects are being blocked. So we unblock what is good for us, and the rest after me the flood. And that cannot ever lead to 100% absorption. So we have to streamline the system so we do not need to unblock and intervene for things to go ahead. Regarding the co-financing, this is indeed a very critical issue at this juncture of Kenya, and we all know why. But the EU is working with both grants and soft loans and concessional loans. So if there's no co-financing, we cannot do blending of grants and loans, leveraging much larger amounts. So in one way or another, we have to find a way around it. Otherwise, we can only work with grants, which will greatly limit the flows into Kenya. So this is also something that is not easy to resolve, but we have to resolve it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. I think those were all very good interventions, and I'm hoping our colleagues were able to take those down. We are now, because we're pressed for time, I would say that in order to ensure the action-oriented spirit of the ambitions of His Excellency the Deputy President, Government of Kenya, and development partners, they've mutually agreed on a decision for this agenda item, and I think a lot of it has been reflected in the conversation here, that will allow us to take steps to address the challenges that have surfaced here related to the absorption capacities of both loans and grants. And so to briefly summarize, and some of this was alluded to by our presenters earlier, that development partners and government will together work to strengthen visibility and alignment of support to Kenya, particularly seeking solutions to render visible and better aligned partnership that is not in the form of direct budget support. And the DPF will mandate a small task force comprising representatives from the government and developing partners to work on identifying concrete recommendations, some of which, of course, were mentioned here, for how to address these key challenges related to absorption capacities. And the task force will report back at the next Development Partners Forum. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the agenda item on absorption capacities, and we will now move on to the strengthening resilience agenda item, which is our second agenda item for today. Again, following the DPF last November, it was agreed that partners would work jointly to identify recommendations for how to strengthen resilience to ensure that this is more coordinated, inclusive, and flexible, among other things. Specifically, 10 joint sector working groups under the coordination of the Office of the Deputy President were tasked to provide inputs to an integrated resilience framework that will help guide both the government and the development partners on how to strengthen our response and report back on this to the DPF membership. I would like now to introduce a very short 1-minute video on resilience produced by the Office of the Deputy President.
In the recent past, heart-wrenching shocks have pierced the heart of Kenya. Irrespective of the challenges faced by adverse effects of climate change, geopolitical factors, political dynamics, and technological disruptions, the nation has stood strong but bruised. We cannot rule out future pandemics, accidents, droughts, floods, epidemics, cultural shifts, political instabilities, food insecurities, and other shocks and stressors that hit with little or no notice. So, we must come together in the face of adversity. We must build and strengthen resilience as individuals, households, organizations, communities, and as a nation. There is need for us to have mechanisms which will ensure better governance and coordination. The need and call to better responses, a harmonized approach, and refined adaptation will yield a prepared nation against disruptions, shocks, and stresses. A national resilience framework will therefore strengthen flexibility, adaptability, and better response.
Your Excellency, Honorable Cabinet Secretaries, PSS, distinguished guests, good morning. As has been introduced, I'm presenting a paper. I think we can put up the PowerPoint. Oh, yes, sorry. Yeah, I'm presenting a paper which we did by a number of us who are in the team. Sorry. Take it back to the beginning, yeah. So I think following the last DPF meeting, we were tasked, a number of us, to look at how we can come up with a framework of strengthening resilience in Kenya. So within your pockets, you have a document that is a little bit more detailed. We have a small presentation that we're going to give. And the main objective of our presentation is to sort of, first of all, look at the conceptual framework of what resilience is, and then with that now define on what we are supposed to do. So the committees that were part of this process of developing this concept were, as listed there, 10 sector working groups comprising of social protection, water and sanitation, devolution, agriculture and livestock, environment protection and natural resources, health, lands, housing and urban development, blue economy, assaults and energy. So, but more special mention is going to be given to also UNICEF and FCDO, which helped in the shaping up of the document that we are talking about. We incorporated them to bring the the development partners component into the definition. So what we did first was we defined what is resilience. And here we were looking at the entirety of it, the ability of individuals, households, communities, and government systems to adapt to, anticipate, withstand, and recover from shocks and stressors in a timely manner. And so in that definition, for the individual, we were looking at how an individual can adjust to new conditions, how an individual can be mentally capable to manage and express emotions constructively so that we can address whatever shocks that come our way. Also improve on the optimism of the individuals, as well as also the social support that they give to each other, ability to solve problems, and also economic sufficiency. For the household was how the household can have multiple streams of income to help them mitigate on the financial risk that comes with the shocks that affect us. Savings, how do we impress savings so that they're able to also on their own solve some of the problems that they are faced with. Access to services, how households can get reliable health care, education, and social services. strong family bonds, because also you find that in resilience, when there are ties in family, they are able to withstand the challenges that come. How can they be prepared as households? And this is where social inclusion, how do they save, how do they store food reserves for themselves, and also health and nutrition. Institutions is how institutions can now have robust and reliable, adaptable physical technological infrastructure to help in supporting families and households in addressing the challenges. Risk management is also one of the other areas that we're looking at. How can institutions anticipate and have strategies to identifying and mitigating on these risks? The other issue also we looked at on resiliency of institutions is continuity planning. How can they plan so that they're able to always anticipate and overcome the challenges? Adaptive leadership. How can institutions have leadership that is flexible, forward-looking, and thinking and responsive? And also looking at employees and collaborative networks so that they're able to sort the challenges that come our way in case of shocks that come. For community, again, social cohesion, leadership at the local level where communities are able to lead themselves to solve problems, resource availability for the community, inclusive participation, education and awareness, as well as community networks. Again, all these, when they are strengthened, that builds a resilient community. The same thing for the county and also for the nation. So that is how we started. First of all, defining how resilience is at every level, from the very micro to the macro level. And we also looked at what are some of these shocks that normally comes our way. First of all, there are droughts, floods, pandemics, epidemics, geofiscal challenges, violence, and economic disruptions. I think in our country for the last few years, we've seen us moving from one extreme end to the other. For the last 4 years up to last year, we were suffering from a very intense drought that we've ever witnessed in a long time. Immediately after that came the issue of the floods, and you could see that if we now don't look for adaptive strategies so that we don't have to be moving from one cycle, responding to one form of extreme shock and moving on to the next one. How do we now adapt the communities? How do we adapt individuals so that the next shock that comes is not as extreme as the last one? So in terms of now defining, again, we said resilience involve adaptive, anticipatory, absorptive, and also transformative. When you look at as a country, we have a number of programs that we've been using to respond to shocks. And here we have Inua Jamii, which is under the social protection. We have complementary programs like, we have also Hunger Safety Network program under the ASAL. And again, these ones are only like responding to shocks, but they don't prepare the community to being able to withstand in the next one. Other complementary programs like economic inclusion program, niche and others, all again are looking at just responding to shocks, but we find that the implementation of such programs again faced a number of issues. One, there is a siloed approach. When you look at Inua Jamii and Hunger Safety Network, it is the same database, but being administered from two different institutions. So the same individual, I think in the world of relief, they'll say double dipping. I could be registered under Hunger Safety Net. I'm also in Inua Jamii. I get the 4,000 in this other arm. I get the other one. And then it is also not so inclusive because it is focusing on a number of areas. So you find a few number are getting more support while others are left out. So the siloed approach is one of the issues. The other one is on the issues of inadequate financing. I know like in Hunger Safety Network, initially used to be 4 counties, now it has been expanded to about 8, and yet when you look at the ASAL counties in the country, there are 23. So what happens to the rest of the other counties? And so, but if we're able to come together and remove this silo approach to solving the problems, then you'll find that we will spread and be able to serve more. Weak coordination is also another challenge, and also legislation to effect coordinated resilience is not yet institutionalized. And I think there is a process, as we are talking of a national disaster risk management bill and social protection that is ongoing. So the gaps that we identified, one is that there is issues on governance, there's issues of financing, and then there's issues of adaptation practices. And I'll want to spend a little bit more time on the adaptation, because when you look at the programs I've mentioned, they're only on response to shocks. And then we sit back, we wait for another shock to come, we mobilize resources again to respond to another shock. And I think what we need to do is, as we respond to shocks, how do we build or implement adaptation practices so that when another shock comes, the impact may not be as high or as big as the previous one. For instance, when you look at the cycles that I mentioned a while ago, in a few months, maybe we may be back here again asking us, we have drought, pasture has been depleted, we have issues of animals dying, people are suffering from water scarcity. Yet, we have just come from a flood situation. So what we are advocating in this resilience strengthening strategy is that how do we program activities that are going to go towards changing and adapting the communities, so that in the areas, and we went through all the sectors, like in our sector of water, how do we harvest, store the water, so that we can avail the same water for irrigation, for household use, and animal and pasture regeneration. In health, how do we strengthen the nutrition? How do we strengthen the health system, immunization? Those are some of the adaptation practices that we need now as we respond to shocks. How do we also have a parallel program to enhance and finance adaptation practices? So in your document that is before you, we have commitments that we've put under what we're calling Annex 1. When you look at the back of it, we've listed on adaptation mechanism, what do we need to do? And the response, what do we need to do? So in a nutshell, that is how we've gone. Like we're saying that we're looking at how we can implement the provision of PFM Act by operationalizing a contingency fund. Again, this is still a work in progress. We will sit down with Treasury now so that we can structure how this contingency fund can be done. We also are saying, how can counties, governments operationalize? Sorry, you're pushing it. Pull it down a bit fast. Down before. Yeah. How county governments can operationalize the county emergency funds as stipulated in the PFM Act. And what happens when there is no emergency in that financial year? Do we then dedicate that funds to an adaptive programs, so that it's not that money that will be absorbed back into the other programs which are not going to help in building the resilience of our people. Put mechanism in place for development partners and private sector to contribute to resilience funds or risk transfer instruments, and then put mechanism for resilience fund to draw both adaptation and response, to fund both adaptation and also response activities. On each sector, I think we've also said we'll look at the regulatory updates. We'll also look at conducting scenario planning so as to see how we are able to address. We went down again, just slow down a bit. Okay, we also came up with a proposed governance and coordination mechanism, which is again starting from the county, that is at the grassroots, coming all the way up to the national, so that we make sure that in all the areas we map them out and we ensure that there is input from every level of our society. Next, I think that should be the end of the presentation. So that is what we presented, and I think before in the next DPF meeting, we'll now come up with a proper strategy and policy which will have been canvassed through cabinet for adaptation, for adoption, and also approval. Thank you.
Thank you, PS, for that presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, again, we will open up for plenary for about 10 minutes. And I want to assure you, I know that there had been hands up in the last round, and we couldn't get to that because of time. Please rest assured that we do want to hear your inputs, and there will be, as mentioned, a small task force, tasked with taking this forward. And so please surface your views to them, and the details of that task force will be in the minutes from this meeting. So please do not lose heart, and please let us open up for the next round of plenary on this issue of resilience. So if we could have any hands up, if you could keep your interventions short, action-oriented, and introduce yourself when the roving mic comes to you. Ambassador.
Thank you. Caroline Vicini, Ambassador of Sweden. We got access to this document that talked about resilience at every level, from the family unit all the way up. And it was a very beautiful instrument, or a very beautiful document in sort of expressing solidarity on each and every level. What I was missing in that document was the gender perspective. Because women in this country own much less than men. It is a very big difference. And here it's talked about people as everyone were more or less similar, and this could be replicated at the different levels. But a household with a single mother with a number of children is a very different family unit than one of us sitting here is having, probably. And also we have been engaged a lot in this social safety net work together with UNICEF, WFP, etc. And I'm not sure, you were mentioning double dipping. I could say in my country that could happen. Here I'm not sure it's such a prevalent problem. I think rather the problem is that more people would need access to this, and on a regular basis, so the income distribution changes.
Observation that resilience is very key, and it is a step towards our economic transformative model. But from the approaches, PS, that you have presented, I would request that we need to really include sustainable models. For example, we have just recently seen a lot of mass effect of floods. If private sector could be really be given also space to support the initiatives of development partners and the government, so that we come up with a sustainable model, for example, building on very good food reserves, and also building on or harvesting rainwater. And this would be very key. In the next few months, we are likely to also experience drought. So we'll be crying from the floods, then we cry from... And what happens in Samburu so that there would be no duplication of initiatives. I saw this during floods. There is this institution that would call for the support, the development support also is also there, government approach where you are able to really document what happens in Samburu, so that, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Patrick, for your points on sustainability, which is music to our ears on the SDGs, of course, and then harmonization to avoid duplication. And thank you, Ambassador, for your points on gender perspectives and that we're lacking, and a broader look on redistribution. Yeah, thanks. On the corner, yeah.
Representing PSRs, and one of the persons in the team that we developed the brief that has been presented by the PS. And it's true what the CEO has said. We are not leaving anyone behind, including the private partner, and what the PS has presented is so that all of us participate in the resilience building of the country. And when we start from individuals, we are trying to look at this individual, whether a female-headed household, whether somebody living with a disability and all that. To start with, we may not be able to reach everybody, but that's where we want to start. Then we come up to the households, and then the connectivity of the systems. As P.S. Korir has said, if we develop these dams and we help these communities to produce the food and all that for their subsistence livelihoods, these communities will at some point have surplus for market. Are these communities connected to the markets? Do they have market access? Have they even been built, capacity built to know what the market requires out there? So that they don't just produce, you take to the market, nobody needs it. Those kind of connectivities, are they able to process this food, maybe even the fruits, the milk and all that, so that we don't end up with losses? For example, some time back there was the issue of, in one of the counties, the milk glut. We saw a KCC pouring milk away. It couldn't handle all of it. And in another corner, at the same time, some people are suffering from hunger. These are the kind of connectivities we are talking about. Can these surplus areas be connected to areas that need these foods and all that? So these are the kind of connectivities we are talking about, so that everybody, the individual, the community, the systems and all that can be resilient.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Kinuthia, for that clarification. We appreciate it. Stephen Jackson, our resident coordinator. Oh.
Thank you. I'll be very brisk because you've heard from me enough, I think. To welcome the government's document, I think we feel it's a very important innovation. And one of the things that it bears out is that resilience programming works. We know from the numbers around the last drought that however bad it was, it would have been twice as bad as that had there not been 10 years of investment in resilience. So that's the first point, which leads to the second, which is that I think it's very helpful, as this document does, that government ask not just partners to be looking for new money, which is in short supply, but that when crisis comes, there be a request to reprogram money. That's very helpful. It frees up partners to be able to look flexibly at their existing portfolio. The third point is that there's a direct connection from this discussion on resilience to the issues that came up at the Africa Climate Summit, Waziri, and I know you and I were talking about that just before the meeting. And so, just to foreshadow things, I think the next Development Partners Forum may well look at, follow on to the Climate Summit, and I would say resilience is an important piece of that discussion too. Fourth point is that we really need to be thinking about insurance. Insurance at the micro level for the smallholder farmer whose crops are destroyed by the floods, but insurance at the national level. Countries can insure, just like how house owners can do, against things like floods and droughts. The Africa Risk Capacity is a proven mechanism for that. The private market also offers it. I think if Kenya is going to be facing these kinds of climate shocks going forward, then actually insurance is something that really needs to be looked at by government. And finally, the architecture point, PS, you told us that the National Disaster Management Bill is going through the House. That's a really key opportunity to get this right, to make sure that we have institutions that are mandated to respond to emergency, but to prepare for emergency, and then very particularly to reduce the risk of emergency. And so that is what the resilience discussion is all about. So let's work together to help Kenya get the institutions that it needs through that bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. On the point about recognizing the work that's already been done and progress made, the need to consider reprogramming, of course, the piece of the ACS follow-up, the Africa Climate Summit follow-up, the discussion around national insurance as an opportunity, as well as the National Disaster Management Bill. I'd like to hand over to Anthony Gorano, UNDP rep. You wanted to say something?
Thanks. My name is Anthony Ngorano. I'm the resident representative of the UNDP. I just want to maybe add to Stephen's list. Kenya has taken really important measures to really mimic or embed this paradigm shift that's seeing us move away our focus from essentially managing disasters to managing risk. And I think maybe just in terms of the National Disaster Risk Management Bill, I think it would be interesting and opportune to see how maybe in this particular conversation we could look at bringing the parliamentarians on board. I think in terms of this bill, it's in transit, I think, from Parliament from the lower house to the upper house, and we know that the last 10 to 15 years this has proven a challenge. I think we're sensing, and I was with PS Somola yesterday and the leaders of both houses, that there is a bicameral but also a kind of a cross-party benches spirit. I think the time to capitalize upon it is now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that detail. We have time for one more intervention from the floor. Going once, twice, and that is that. Thank you so much for your valuable interventions, which will have been captured by our colleagues on the side there from the Deputy President's office. So, ladies and gentlemen, as for the previous agenda item on absorption capacities, to ensure an action-oriented meeting, the government and development partners have decided on how to proceed from here. And to summarize, it is recommended that the integrated resilience framework is further refined and requests the co-chairs of the joint sector working groups, in particular on ASAL, agriculture, social protection, devolution, environment, climate and forestry, water and sanitation, energy, land and housing, public finance management, and gender, to provide concrete recommendations to facilitate the finalization and operationalization of the framework. And second, that development partners are invited to support the government in finalizing and implementing the integrated